right. Welcome, welcome. I'm really excited for this morning. This evening that we're going to have together. As Michelle clued you in last night, we're going to be doing kind of emulating Jada Pinkett Smith's Red Table Facebook Live. I am not Jada Pinkett Smith, and this is not a red table, but we're going to make that work tonight. So for the next couple of evenings together, you're going to get to hear some real candid conversations about race, ethnicity, and culture. And tonight we're going to really dive into beauty, what's beautiful about our culture. And then tomorrow night we're going to get into the brokenness, some of the things that have hurt us. And then the night after that we're going to get into restoration. What does Jesus have to say about all that? All right? Before we get into this, I really want to say something. All the staff up here at the table, all the ones in the back, we enter into this conversation in a posture of saying that we love you, each and every one of you, and we care about you. And that's why we want to talk about these things. We don't want anyone in this space to feel overlooked or dismissed. We come into these conversations thinking about each one of you. We don't have an agenda. We don't want to make any points. We care about you and your journey, and that's why we want to have this candid conversation. I also want to say none of us are experts. We don't have a degree. You don't have a degree in this, right? Okay. We don't have a degree in all of this, right? We're not experts in this. We're on a journey with you, but maybe what we can say is we're a couple of steps maybe ahead of you. And if a word picture might help right now, is if this was if this conversation for some of you might feel brand new. And for some of you might feel like, man, I'm having this conversation again. I'm just listening to them have it, And a word picture that might help is a spiral staircase, when you look at it from the side, as people go through the staircase, they're going higher and higher. But if you look at the spiral staircase from the top, it just looks like a circle. And it looks like they're just going round and round and round. And for some of you, we might be talking about a topic that's brand new for you, just getting into the circle, right? And for some of you, this is your third, fourth, fifth year in a row talking about this, but my hope and my prayer tonight is that you go one step higher, one step closer to what the Lord has in store. Amen? Amen. All right. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to hand it over to our table to introduce who they are. Oh, by the way, my name's Linton Daniel. I'm the regional director, and AKA Jada. All right. Frank, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Frank Espinosa. I serve on staff at the University of Texas at San Antonio. Frank Espinosa. I serve on staff at the University of Texas at San Antonio. That's my big crazy family.
Mine's on, right? Okay. My name is Brittany Golston, and I'm the staff at Texas Southern University. This is a picture of my family this past Christmas, some of them. In our pajamas.
My name is Harold Chong, and I staff at UT Arlington, and it's not my family, but it is a picture of two pictures. One of a dozen donuts, and the other is my donut shop back in Arlington.
My name is Taylor Kirby, and I'm on staff at the University of Texas at Dallas. And this is my family. It's me as a child.
All right, very cool. Maybe one thing we can get, one question I can ask you guys to get started is, we're talking about our ethnicity, our culture. Growing up, when were you aware of your ethnic identity, or have you grown up in that? And when did that awareness kick in for you?
Yeah, so I'll first start by kind of sharing how I even identify first. So I identify as third generation Mexican American. My family's been in Texas, really San Antonio, for 3 generations. So I think even a more descriptive term is something called Tejano. It's like Mexican American Texans. it's also cool music too. But growing up, I grew up in a part of San Antonio, the south side, that is majority Latino, but majority Mexican American or Mexican. So I wasn't necessarily aware of my ethnicity, and I think even kind of the way that San Antonio is set up, it's both kind of economically and then like racially, ethnically still segregated. So you go to one particular part of the town, you'll see one particular ethnic group. So that's the south side, that's a bunch of Mexican Americans. So I think because of that, like even in all my education, it just never came up and we never had to have those conversations because we all look the same and did a lot of the same stuff. But I think even still, like for my family and I, whenever we would go to other parts of San Antonio or cross into other like neighborhoods that were like predominantly one ethnic group or another, then we'd kind of talk about the difference or notice the differences. And I think even as like kind of a coping mechanism for that too, we would just like joke as a way to like kind of deal with some of the racial tensions and stuff too. But I think it didn't occur to me my own like ethnic identity story until I got to college. Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, I feel like my story is very similar to yours. So I identify as Black or African American. I feel like African American can be a little bit formal, so I use Black more often. And I grew up in Detroit, Michigan, and Detroit is definitely segregated in some of the ways I think that you said. But we have like Southwest Detroit that's like Mexican town, and it's called Mexican Town. And then there's like the Jewish area of town where only Jewish people live, and they have like a way of life and way of being, and it's like a inclusive community. And then like all the Black people are kind of in Detroit, all the white people are kind of like in the suburbs. And so I grew up knowing, I was completely aware that I was Black. But I didn't have to lack of a better word, I didn't have to deal with other ethnicities unless I left the confines of Detroit. And so I knew how to cross cultures, but I didn't have to do it unless my family was stepping outside of our bounds.
Yeah, so both of you guys were in communities that were very similar to you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
How about you guys?
Me too. Yeah. So I grew up in North. I grew up in North Texas. So I grew up in a suburb called Flower Mound. It's pretty. Yeah. So I see have some head nods here. It is a really homogenous suburb. So it's majority white. It's relatively wealthy community. And so I had friends from different ethnic backgrounds in high school, but I definitely wasn't aware that I had an ethnicity or a culture. I don't think I realized that until college. Because I'm from the majority, from my community, but also in the country, I saw things as like, oh, this is just like normal, and other people have a culture. And so I remember growing up thinking culture was really beautiful and like having an interest in learning about other people's cultures, but not really feeling like I had one myself. And so, that's kind of like, it wasn't until college later. Yeah.
Your story similar?
My story actually, I feel like it feels a little different. Recently, before this, I looked up kind of the demographic breakdown of like my high school, and it's actually like right now it's like, and I'm sure it's not that different from whenever I was there. It's like 45% white, about 25% Latino, 20% Black, and like 5% Asian, and then it's like other, right? So I think for me, I think I was pretty aware like from a pretty early age, and I think even like the place where like we sell donuts, like we're like the only like Korean people there, like East Asian people, and so I think I was just always pretty aware, and I think really like when I got to high school, I think I actually didn't really want to be Asian. Like that was kind of the last thing that I wanted to be, and especially like whenever I played football, I was like one of like 2 Asian people who were like on the football team, and so. Yeah, so I think there are like places of like brokenness there, and And I share about that even though like it's beauty night because I think like really like I really feel like beauty is like really highlighted in the midst of like brokenness. You know, you see it come out of that.
Yeah. I mean, I get that. Like some of you, some of you you felt very different from the community around you, and some of you felt very much same in the community around you. I'm very similar. Like I went to a school that's predominantly white. Actually, my brother and I were the only people of color in the whole school. And so it was one of those things. Like I would see my brother. I mean, like, we would stick out. Like I'd be like, "What's up, brother?" You know. But yeah, I mean, like, but then I like you. It became like it was an awareness that happened quickly. You know, because I wasn't around people like me. I felt different. You know. So like as you were growing up. And even now, like, what are some beautiful things that you've been learning about your ethnicity and from your perspective, right? You can't speak on behalf, like I can't speak on behalf of all the South Asians here, and they might yell at me. But from your own perspective, though, like, what did you learn about your ethnic identity? What feels beautiful to you?
I feel like I'm gonna want to say something else, like as y'all talk, but
And you can.
Okay. Freedom. I was like, I don't know, it's my turn. So I mean, one of the things is like the diversity of Blackness. Like I mean, you could be biracial, you could be African, you could be African American, you could be Caribbean, you could be like multiracial. So that's like one thing. But I think even across those, it's kind of like there's like beauty in just the way that we do things, like our food, the music we listen to, the dances we come up with, the fact that other people like want to like start taking our dances like after, like I mean we're so creative, but that's beautiful to me. And then I think movement in general, just like the way we express ourselves like through our bodies, like that's some beautiful stuff. But I feel like I want to say something else later.
No, I think similarly for Latinos, which for me it wasn't apparent growing up, but seeing the diversity even among like ethnic Latino groups too, like not everybody's not just Mexican. Like there's Panamanian, Venezuelan, and et cetera. Like 20 something countries across Latin America. So I think there's a lot of like beauty in the similarities of our ethnicities, but there's a lot of differences too. So I think like as I think about something that's similar across ethnicities, Latino ethnicities, would be I think there's a resilience among our people. I think of like colonization and things, and our people have come out of suffering, but there are still traits that we carry, like how to have fun and celebration, and how to keep hope in the midst of some hard situations. And I think that's pretty evident across ethnic groups.
Yeah. How do you guys resonate with that? Are there things that you find beautiful? Any things that you see overlap?
Yeah, I think similarly, like even as I think about like the Asian diaspora, it's like for me, I'm Korean, and I think oftentimes like with the word Asian, there's this connotation of like someone who's East Asian, right? But then there's also like Southeast Asian, there's South Asian, right? And this is all like encompassing, like, exactly, right? So and so I think there's like a lot of beauty in that, right? And there are like things that like we resonate with each other, but there are also things that we're like, wow, like that's pretty distinct. Like, that's really beautiful to see, right? And like that's something that should be celebrated. And I think as far as for Korean, I think something that like I've just really seen is like tenacity, like hard work. I think like this value for like education, like always like putting your kids first. I think that is probably the thing that like I have seen as like a constant among like Korean parents. Like the kids are first. And my parents like didn't buy stuff for themselves. It was always like you get McDonald's or you get a McFlurry and we'll just get a cone. I don't know.
You got McDonald's?
Yeah, I did. I was a pretty big kid, so.
My dad told me a Happy Meal was just eating a meal and being happy.
So pretty different experiences, right?
Right.
All under the system.
Yeah. Well, I think that there's some I feel like there's some irony in answering this question as a white person. because one of the like cultural values that many like people from different white ethnic backgrounds have is individuality. And so there's a lot of like this, hello. Yes. Right, okay, we're good. Oh, I'm talking to you guys. So one of the things, I'm talking to you. All right, so one of the things that, because it's like, so like I was saying earlier with my story of like not really knowing that I even had a culture or ethnicity, and then in college starting to become more aware, and then I started feeling really terrible, and I was just like, I'm not sure there's anything good about my background. And I think some of that, like even in this conversation, as we're talking about like race and ethnicity, like race is this kind of social construct that was created based solely on people's appearance, not based upon their culture, where they're from, their heritage. And so people have been grouped into these things for oppression, for the benefit of others, to the benefit of my people. And I think that because of that, like there's white people don't always feel like a connection, like as this large group of white people, because of being the majority, because being basically at kind of the top of that, of that system, right? Benefiting from that system. So I think one of the things that has been interesting for me as a white person, trying to figure out like what is beautiful about my ethnicity, apart from, like being someone who's like benefited from levels of white privilege, things like that, is really starting to understand that I do have an ethnicity and culture. And so my ethnicity, we didn't share this earlier, I guess, but so I'm white, but my ethnic heritage is a mix of like Irish and English, but I have like little to no cultural ties to my heritage. But a lot of my cultural and ethnic ties come from being like my family lived in like Indiana, Kentucky, and Texas, like for generations. But so I think one of the things that is beautiful about like being white culture is like individualism, like this kind of thing, like things that you hear growing up as your parents, like you can be whatever you want to be, like this idea that you're your own, you're your own person, you have your own thoughts. And I know that there's some like challenges and problems with individualism too. So anyways, I just want to recognize some of that irony for many of us, like especially if you're like just beginning to realize that you have an ethnicity, it's hard to be like, well, what is beautiful? I didn't even know I had one. So it's like, I think it's the beautiful like discovering that I do have ethnicity, that I do have culture, has been like a good journey for me.
Yeah, I mean, totally. Like, I like that distinction that you make there, like some definitions around ethnicity. Like you guys talked about like the diversity, and like what you were naming was ethnicity, right? Like you and I are racially classified as Asian, right? But like we were very different, like, for a long time, for a long time, like I think I was confused, like when you get those forms and you're supposed to pick something, I was like, yo dad, what do I pick, and that was on a cool story my dad told me, was that back in the day, a lot of South Asians were told to check white. And that was a really confusing thing about that. But, over time, like we've learned to see some beauty in the fact that God has kind of brought us into this country in such a way that we're able to eventually separate ourselves and distinguish ourselves. But that story is very different from yours, but we're still grouped together, and even though we're ethnically different. And more to say about that, or I can keep moving us along, or
I think I wanted to say something. So it was like a lot of stuff that was being said. So like you was talking about being resilient. I was like, dang, I think I want to say something about that. But when you just said that, I think you said that it was that you didn't know it was beautiful initially, right? So I feel like I got some answer. So I think that I feel like I knew some of the things that were beautiful, but I think when I thought about like myself, I'm like, what's beautiful about my type of blackness? And so I like hit this point when I came to Houston, because I was working for HBCU. And well, not when I first got here. My second year, when I started working for university, I was at the HBCU, Texas Southern. And I think I was having a hard time connecting with my students a little bit because I feel like we had different types of blackness. But then I felt like it was like, did they really like think that I was black enough? So then I had to figure out like what was going on with that. And I think I landed on the fact that I was, but really it was like this like distinction between like whether I like distinction between like high and low identity and then like high and low assimilation. So I felt like I was like medium to high identity. Like I don't feel like I walked around like, oh, I'm not black. I didn't feel like I was there. I feel like I was like, I'm definitely black. I know this. So I feel like I was on the higher end. But then with assimilation though, like I feel like I was hot, medium to high on assimilation. I feel like it was easy for me to just kind of blend in with dominant culture or just like, I mean, I already said that I could cross culture as well as far as engaging with people, but I just feel like it was easy for me to like adapt or like turn to maybe the white way of doing things. But, you know, as I spent like more time getting to know my students and more time like trying to self-discover a little bit, I just kind of realized like it was okay to be where I was, and it was okay for my students to be where they were because we came out of completely different contexts. Like I grew up in Detroit, it was mostly black people. Then I went to Michigan State, which is a predominantly white institution, and so I mean, I would find the pockets of black people, but then most of the time I'm like with Asian people, with white people, like with other people, and so it was a different experience. And I think also being in the northern part of the country, like being in places like Detroit, Chicago, something like that, like our families have been in like white areas for so long that my family is medium to high assimilated. So of course I'm gonna be medium to high assimilated. Versus my students where they like grow up in predominantly black areas, a lot of my students came out of third ward, and they just used to blackness. And so they're higher identity, they're lower assimilated. And so I kind of noticed those differences, but eventually got to a place where I was like, okay, it's cool. Like your blackness, my blackness, everybody blackness is cool.
Yeah, I'm curious. Like, are there like more stories from your own life that that you know just kind of call out the beautiful things? Like Taylor, when you were talking, like I realized that there was like this idea of like, your parents calling out what was in you. And like you can be those things, like you can do whatever you set your mind to. Like it was totally different in my house. My dad was like, you got 3 options. You can be an engineer, a doctor, or an engineer. And I was like, oh, thank you, Dad. And I often heard from my dad like, you are our retirement plan. I'm like, no pressure. The beauty in that was like, I felt like we were so connected. Like my parents were like, we're going to give everything that we, like you were saying, we're going to give everything we have to you. And then, and in return, we hope that you'll bless us back. But, there's this kind of reciprocity there. And so I love that. And then there's a hierarchy there. Like we really respect the generation before us, and almost times that they can say something and that's it, or like if an elderly gentleman or like a grandfather walks in, people get up and like give them the seat, and stuff like that. So those are some beautiful things I see in my culture. What about you guys? Like, what are some beautiful things that you see?
I can share. I guess like something that has kind of been like a theme in my ethnic identity journey is this idea of like recognizing things in the past. And there's really one memory, like it's a really strong memory, and I think it's a memory of my mom that to me is like so beautiful and it's just like so sacrificial. So my parents, they immigrated from Korea. My sister's here. I think it's 91, right? Yeah. Sometimes I forget, love some more, I guess. But so my parents came from 91, and then they started the donut shop whenever I was born, so 94. So they've been working at this donut shop ever since, and they wake up at like 3, 4 a.m. Sometimes if it's like a big order, right, like even earlier. So I think I've just like seen that like for so many years, and like even like helping out now, I'm like back then I was like, man, like they're just always working and like we want to do stuff, but they have to sleep early. But I think now like now that I help them out here and there, I'm like, wow, like they're amazing people. You know, they just do so much for their children. And there's one specific memory, and I think for me it's so beautiful. My mom like staying up with me and my brother until like midnight, 1 a.m., something like that, and just to make sure that like we were 2 grades ahead, like in this specific subject. And I remember as a kid, I mean, I was like, why are you like doing this? You got work in the morning too, right? But I didn't care about that. I was trying to go to sleep, right? But I was like, you have like work. And like, I'm like, I don't get it, you know? Can I just look in the back and like get the answers? And she's like, no, you have to write it out, figure it out, like everything, right? She's like a professor, and I was like in the 5th grade, you know. But that was like her way of love to me. It's like I want to see you excel, and I'm like willing like to get 2 or 3 hours of sleep, like so that would happen. So at the time, I think, and so that's why I say I recognize. At the time, I was pissed. I was like, dude, you have to go to sleep. I have to go to sleep, you know. But now I'm like, that's like beautiful, and it was so sacrificial.
I think I don't know, for me, I didn't recognize it at the time, but as time goes on, or as you look back, you're like, oh yeah, here's some beautiful things, or like, this is like customary of my family, or like our ethnic story. So I think like 2 kind of stories that come to mind. So I think something that I've been realizing that is beautiful about Mexican and Latino culture is just like communal, and I think my family is like that, super tight. But I remember when I went to college, so I was the first in my family to go to college. So it's like the biggest thing, you know, like Mijo's going to college, like, and I'm from San Antonio. My parents were like upset that I was going so far to Austin, which is like an hour away. Why are you moving? I'm like, it's an hour away. But I could have been moving to like California, Washington, or something. So I remember like leading up to freshman year, moving into the dorm in Jester. Like I was talking to my mom, like, okay, we're getting everything. We went to the store to buy everything that I needed. And so I was like, oh, so who's gonna come up after all? Like when I move in, she's like, oh yeah, me, your dad, probably like your siblings and a couple other people. I'm like, okay, cool. So then move-in day comes, and you know, my mind's elsewhere. I'm like super nervous about going to college. And then I realized that driving down I-35, you know, going from San Antonio to Austin is my parents, my brother, my sister, my grandma, my grandpa, my aunt, my uncle, and some other cousins.
Wow.
Yeah, everybody went. So I'm like, oh my gosh, that's crazy. I'm like, wow. Do other people's families do this for them when they move to college? So I'm like, okay, okay, well, we're just gonna park. I'm gonna go take my things to my dorm, and everything's gonna be cool, you know, bye mom, you know, everybody else. And no, like all my family went, parked in the garage with me, got off, and then eventually started taking my things off my car, and we're all walking into Jester dorm together. Wow. So, and I mean, the thing too was like, I lived on the 10th floor, which is like the highest one, and I'm like trying to hide, getting in there, like, oh my gosh, this is kind of embarrassing. So I was just like, man, if people didn't know I was Mexican before, like they do now, you know? But I think that's something I've come to know, like to really appreciate is like my family's tight, you know, they like do things together, and not just so like community, and not just even in like cool like times like that, but even in hard times too, like learning to be together, but also to celebrate together. So I think like even just a couple years ago, one of my grandmothers ended up passing away. So of course it was a super sad and hard time for us. But like again, normally in the past we would gather family, friends of the family who lived near my grandmother. We would always just get together at her house and like hang out on the porch and stuff. So one thing that we when she was placed on hospice care, my family's like, what are we gonna do to like celebrate her life, honor her? And she loved to dance. She loved to sing to like that Tejano music that I mentioned. So what we ended up doing was we hired some mariachis to come perform for her. And so we were just kind of all out on the porch and just like, it was really sad, but it was also really beautiful to see like we're in this together. You know, it's community, and we're celebrating even in the midst of a hard situation.
Wow.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Frank. I think it's interesting because I can resonate with some of just like this feel of like family and like what it means to celebrate. But I imagine from my family, my celebration's like a little different. Like I think it's interesting like this idea of like closeness because I actually have like a relatively small family. Like it's not like huge, relatively small family. And so for me, something that I found that's beautiful about my family is that when we spend time together, like there's this idea of just like being together, like it can be kind of quiet. Like and there's like something about like enjoying things together and like quiet and reflection that's like a pretty deep like family value for us. And I think it can be a cultural value. And so even like most of my memories with my family like are involved like doing things outdoors. So like I'm like very like typical like white girl, country girl kind of thing. Like I rode horses, I had a farm, you know, like that kind of thing. Yeah, really. I had a llama named Larry and like, you know,
A llama? Did you say a llama?
Say that again. You got a
yeah, I
llama?
had a llama.
You got a llama. Wow.
Yeah, just gotta put that in there.
You should have put a picture of
That is so
that.
different. Wow.
We want to see the llama.
Right, where's the llama?
So Larry the llama, you know, but like a lot of my memories were like with my family outside, like doing work outside or like sitting outside enjoying things, not necessarily saying a whole lot, but being together. And so like my family, like fishing and hunting was a really big deal. So even I think I was reminded of this when you shared about your grandmother, because my grandfather passed away last year, and he was an avid fisherman, and so like we used to go to Granddad's house and go fishing, and we like all sit out there and like go fishing. And I think when I was little, I never appreciated it. I was like, I want to go catching, I don't want to go fishing. I'm like sitting here in the quiet, there's nothing to entertain me.
Catching?
Yeah, I'd rather catch fish, not fish for fish. You know, like, you know what I mean? Like.
Right here.
That's great, yeah, because not everyone's been fishing so often. So basically, when you fish, you know, you're fishing, sometimes you can fish all day, hours, and you never catch a single fish.
Oh, so sad.
Right. Yeah. And so as a child, I was like, why would you want to do that? You sit out all day and you're fishing. People aren't talking, they're fishing. They're just fishing. You're like enjoying like the surroundings. And like for what I've come to realize is that for my family, it's like a really like reflective thing. They're like spending time in creation, right? They're reflecting and we're being together as a family.
Wow.
And so now I've grown to really appreciate it. Yeah. So even I saw like after my granddad passed away, my dad and my uncle, as a way to mourn, would go fishing once a week, you know, like, and just sit there and fish, like remembering my granddad. And so there was something of like being together and like celebrating, and but it's like more like a lot of it had to do with being outdoors, and it was more like silent and reflective. So that's something interesting. And I would rather catch fish instead of just fish. Still, but I appreciate fishing now for what it was for my family.
So you're saying that you don't want to go unless you're going to catch something, but you don't know if you're going to catch something unless you go.
Right, but now I want to go regardless because I understand that I can like appreciate it. Right?
Well, I'm not going to be able to preach the sermon in that. So I want to talk about my grandma too. I mean, honestly, when you started talking about your grandpa, I was like, oh, I want to talk about both of them. So my grandpa, I I mean, I want to talk about this idea of my grandparents showing their love or demonstrating it more so than saying it. Because I didn't come from a family that said, I love you, you know? And now I'm just kind of like, I'm not doing that to my kids. But my grandparents show it, you know, just by like spending time with us. My grandpa would pick us up from school every day. I mean, like, I would look out of the window from my classroom and he would be sitting outside, like standing outside his car, like waiting for us to get out of school, me and my sister. And then he would like, we would go home, we would have grilled cheeses or like ramen noodles. I say ramen, not ramen. Ramen noodles for our after school snack. I mean, like, we would go to the liquor store. Okay, I would go to the store and he would like play lottery and then he would like buy us Hostess, you know, like Suzy Q's and Ding Dongs and all this, all this things, right? All these interesting names for Hostess. Kit Kats, you know, all this stuff. And so that was our thing. He would buy the newspaper. Like, we just had this routine of things that we did, but it was the time we spent, and that's the stuff that I remember. And my grandpa's been gone for like, since like 2004 or something, 2003 or 4. But then my grandmother, something similar but different. I don't even know that it was like a quality time for her. I think now that I'm older, it's quality time, but before, it was like her being able to support us like financially or with gifts or something, or giving us the things that we needed. So like if my parents couldn't come through on something, my grandma had us. And I think that that's like across the board. Like she has 3 kids, it's the same story for all of her kids or her kids' kids. And so like I can think of like coming home from college one time, and my dad could not pick me and my sister up. Both my sister and I both went to Michigan State. And you know, it's time, maybe it's the summertime, we need to clear out the dorm so we can go home. And my grandma came up, she drove an hour and a half to get up there for us, and she couldn't fit all of the stuff like in her car. Initially we couldn't fit it in the car because it's 2 people with 2 dorms. But she was like gonna drive back like 2 times to get all the stuff. And it's like, that's my grandma, she old. But that was her love, right? Like I don't think I ever heard her say I love you. Maybe a little bit as I got older, but that I know it though. I know it in her actions. Like every single time she had her back, and she still does it at like 73, something like 76, somewhere in there.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, that's similar to me. Like my parents, they rarely said I love you, but the translation for that is, did you eat? Yeah, did you die? No. Okay. I mean, like, my dad would call or my mom would call, and I mean, there's, you know, like normal people would talk about their day. My mom was like, okay, so what you eat today? I'm like, you really want me to go through that? You know? And it's her way of indirectly saying I love you. And I remember my brother made this shirt, and he came home, he came back from college, and it just says, did you eat? I just came up with my bro. I was like, man, I love you too, man. You know, those are the beautiful things about like all of our stories. You know, they're really different. Like, I mean, you know, some are communal, some are very individual, some are quiet, some are loud, some are, you know, all over the place. You know, and some are like direct, some are indirect, like, you know, and but God in some way, form or fashion, like He made each of those things beautiful. You know, and that's wild to me that we could just sit here at this table and be so different, but God looks at all of it and says it's good. Like the way you guys, the way we all lived our lives, the way we felt love from our parents, our grandparents, or the way we hang out with one another, all of that, God looks down at that and says it's beautiful. You know, and like, so what it makes me believe is that our ethnicities, our backgrounds, were not an accident. They were purposely given to us by God. You know, when you look at the way the story ends in Revelation, like John says, I see every nation, tribe, tongue, you know, come to worship God. And so if He can see it, that means our ethnic identity is something we keep with us. It's not something that was produced because of the fall. You know, like God gave it to us as a gift, and He's going to redeem that, and we're going to get to continue to bring all our gifts together, right? And And that's one thing that I love, you know, when I even think about Moses' story, I mean, his story has like all kinds of twists and turns, you know, like, but at the end of the day, he was a tricultural guy, you know, like he was born Hebrew, he's ethnically Hebrew, but you know, he grew up in an Egyptian house. So he's culturally Egyptian, you know, and I don't even know, like when we asked Moses these questions, like, when are you aware of your, you know, I don't know what he would say, you know.
He'd say pass.
You know, but then like, you know, at some point in the story, some things happen, he goes to Midian, you know, and then he marries a Midianite woman, and even in that, like every one of those vignettes, God had a plan and a story for Moses. He wanted him to be Hebrew. He wanted him to get his education in an Egyptian household. He wanted him to go into Midian and experience the culture of the Midianite people and marry a Midianite woman, because all of that was the plan of God. You know, it's his story. And his story is very different from ours, but it was God looked down on it and said it was good, you know. And what do we think about that? Like that God had a sovereign foundation for each of us. And part of that is our family and our ethnic identity. You know, God didn't make a mistake in that, you know, and that's beautiful. Amen? You know, and so, you know, as we close out, you know, I want that to resonate in all of our hearts, that God did not make a mistake. Everything about your life, all of those people that you've been with, the way your family acts, even your weird uncle, all of that, you know, God brought into your life because he has a sovereign foundation for your life. And can we even be willing to accept that? You know, can we accept that it's a gift from God? And not look at it as a bad thing, a broken thing, but God gave you that specifically to you because he loves you. And we're going to get to fully celebrate it and to fully realize kingdom. It's going to be a crazy party up there because we're all so different. All the kings and all the nations are all going to bring their best before God. That's going to be a crazy buffet. Thank you, Jesus, for that. Amen. You know, it's going to be curry up against other things, you know, but you know, curry definitely in my mind, you know. It's going to be good. It's going to be like our mom, our grandma's cooking. You know, it's going to be pleasing to God. And I think I want to pray now, you know. With that in mind, it's beautiful, right? This is beautiful. Let me pray.